through this door and enter a nightmare of supernatural horror. 7 Doors of Death.
Welcome to the ACEVEDO video store. Today we're going to review The Beyond from 1981, directed by Lucio Fulci. The story begins in Louisiana of 1927. Within a hotel, a group of locals invaded and go up to one of the rooms where a supposed warlock is painting something, and he gets brutally executed in the basement. Several decades later, in the early 80s, Lisa inherits the hotel, which is now more run down, and is being taken care of by 2 caretakers, Arthur and Martha. And Lisa sooner or later finds out that the hotel is cursed and haunted, and in the basement leads to a gateway to hell. So that's the basic plot of the film. I really enjoyed the movie. The movie is pretty great. I did thought the story is a little bit cliche, mostly relying on trope, where it's like, oh no, it's a haunted house. It feels like a kind of like a parody in a sense where we have the trope is like, oh, my uncle or long distance relative inviting me to their big scary looking mansion, or I just inherited this big and scary looking mansion from that long distance relative. So it's a little cliche in that effect, but everything else is pretty original on its own. The interesting thing about the story is that they apparently wrote a script out for the movie, of course, but according to Larry Ray, the US production member, when they were shooting it in like New Orleans, Florida.
Hi Larry, how's it going?
Oh, good morning. I'm going to have this whole wall finished by tonight.
Great.
Bye.
They apparently did not have a shooting script. In fact, they only had a 2.5-page outline that they were using and a master script that they will consistently go back to. So I don't think anybody had like a full script of the movie. And to be honest, I would have believed if it was like, you know, they were filming it without a script, because there's like some like lines of dialogue that kind of feels like very much, let's just improvise something real quick and all that. Because that's like another thing Larry Ray mentioned, that when they were making the movie, Lucio Fulci, he'll come up with like new ideas and start filming on those ideas and all that. And one of the most memorable parts of that is that there's this long highway bridge. I'm forgetting what it is, and they consistently had to keep driving back and forth on it because, I don't know, their hotels were on this side, or all their filming locations were on the other side. But Lucio Fulci was like, hey, let's film here. So that's how we get like the very iconic imagery of that highway and all that. Of course, there's that famous self-portrait of Lucio Fulci sitting in the middle of it, which apparently they were going over schedule on it, and they were getting complaints like, hey, we closed this highway for like, you know, only for 2 hours, but you're still there. You gotta get out of there. Another thing that made me think, you know, this was the dialogue was semi-improvised, was during the cameo by Lucio Fulci. He plays a small role in the movie. He plays a librarian. The librarian leaves, the guy goes up to the stairs, gets the book, and then suddenly lightning strike, but it's on the side of the library that doesn't have windows. Not the other side of the library where it does actually have windows. And he gets eaten by spiders. And it's really disgusting, to the point that I actually did not sit through that scene. I actually just skipped forward to it. It looks fine. I don't have to see the entirety of them. But his dialogue is so funny and all that. In order to have the librarian to leave, they seem like they have to improvise something, because the librarian's like,
you haven't heard about our town employees' latest labor victory? Took a 3-week strike to win.
Yeah, it was something about lunch.
An earlier break. I'm sure you'll be okay on your own. I'll be out till, I don't know, 1 or a quarter of. You feel completely at home now, you hear?
Have a happy lunch.
To be honest, it's like really funny to me. They couldn't just say like, I have something else happening, or like have some other person like, Mr. Librarian, can you come over please? We need something here. They're just like, we were on a worker strike, so I'm going to have my early break. Another thing about the story is that I find interesting when during research was in the audio commentary, David Warbeck, who plays one of the main characters of the film, he talks about how he thought when they were filming that the film very felt much like a ripoff of The Shining, and told the producers, like, hey, this kind of reminded me of The Shining. And the producers like, oh, we haven't heard about that. But to be honest, I kind of find that being like a little disrespectful to The Beyond. In hindsight, they probably didn't see like, you know, the full picture of the movie until like came out in theaters and you could now see it and all that. Because that's like saying a Bruce Lee movie is like a Jackie Chan movie, because in both movies they fight a lot of guys. You know, it's like when you get to like the basics like that, it's kind of like saying like The Lion King is a ripoff of Kimba just because it's a story about lions in Africa and they have problems and they have antagonists doesn't mean it's the same thing or they're ripping off one of the other. So I kind of find that being disrespectful because The Beyond is very much original to its own. I do see some other similarities. We have like ghost-like things and all that where people don't know if they're talking to actual ghosts and all that. That does happen in The Beyond. They can't explain the supernatural things happening and all that. But I feel like The Beyond is very much of its own original film that doesn't have to be very much compared to The Shining. The most fantastic thing about the film is, of course, is the special effects sequences, particularly the gore effects, which really do stand out and are quite effective. Another standout thing about this film is cinematography. Some of these scenes are played out in long shots. For example, a shot will have like a character talking, we zoom out, we pan over to the next character, and they're like, whatever happened to the other guy? And we pan over, and that's the other guy standing over there. The interesting thing I learned is for the first like opening part of the film, where it takes place in the 1920s, it's in sepia tone. They actually shot the entire sequence in color and then added that effect later on during post-production. And it's pretty effective as well. The cinematography is really great. It's done by Sergio Savanti, who has previously worked with Lucio Fulci before. One of their early collaborations was for The Apocalypse. In fact, I think a few crew members have worked for Apocalypse and kept working with Fulci for, The Beyond and the rest of like the Gates of Hell trilogy, as they call it. The music is really great as well. It's done by Fabio Frizzi, which I recognize his music as a Godzilla fan of the 1977 Italian re-edit of the American cut of the film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, nicknamed Cozilla. I did hear that the American version of The Beyond, known as Seven Doors of Death, actually has a different soundtrack. And I haven't seen the American cut of the film for this review. I did skim through some of it because apparently someone uploaded it on YouTube. And the music is somewhat fine and all that, but I feel like the music for the original soundtrack is very effective on the visuals of the films and the emotions of the characters, that I'm not sure how they were just easily just replaceable for the American cut of the film. The American cut also suffered some like very egregious editing, where I looked up moviecensorship.com, and essentially they cut out all the fantastical gore scenes and all that, or anything that was too gory that will move the R rating to an NC-17 rating. Another like standout thing about the film is the acting. The cast for this film, I didn't realize until like after watching and like doing research that it's completely stacked. So you have Katrina McCall, which they misspell her name in the opening credits. Instead of a C, it's a K, who had worked with Lucio Fulci beforehand and also did another film afterwards. And then you have David Warbeck. Didn't recognize him until I looked up his credits. He plays Sean from A Fistful of Dollars, also known as Stuck You Sucker, a Sergio Leone's film, his last Western. You also have the actress who plays Martha. Her name is slipping off my mind, unfortunately, but she also has pretty interesting credits. One of her early works is playing a key character in the Marlon Brando movie, Last Tango in Paris. So yeah, this is a really enjoyable movie. So I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. Side note, I actually own Lucio Fulci's westerns, well, 2 of them at least, for the Apocalypse and Massacre Time on this like Mill Creek 44 movie spaghetti western collection. So they couldn't find 6 more movies to fill that role for some reason. I mainly got this for Shanghai Joe until I realized it has a very terrible video transfer of it. Should have just jumped forward with a Blu-ray instead of getting $15 for this. But hey, I could probably sit through a bunch of classic westerns. So I bought 2 copies of this movie. This one I kind of regret getting. I'll explain to this later, but let's start off with the Blu-ray release here. So this is the Blu-ray release of the film. It's from Grindhouse Releasing, and they just re-released this movie last year in this giant like 4K set, which includes a few versions of the film. The composer's cut, which is supervised by the composer Fabio Frizzi, it also features the opening in color. In this Blu-ray, it includes the color version of the opening, but appears to be from a video transfer and not like a new, HD scan of it, which is interesting because the co-founder of Grindhouse Releasing replacing Bob Murawski, who also edited Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind, Gone with the Pope, and also the Spider-Man trilogy with Sam Raimi. He talks about in an interview he recently did that he had a friend who owned a foreign film print of The Beyond. So I'm presuming they just like transferred that print to like a previous DVD release, but then like retransfer it in HD for this Blu-ray release. But they did do a new 4K scan of it for for the 4K release last year, which I'll get into more later. This Blu-ray release is also stacked with a lot of bonus features. I haven't sat through all of them, but one of the things I listened through is the audio commentary with David Warbeck and Katrina McCall. And it's very interesting to listen to because it sounded like they didn't took the job very seriously, or they kind of had a low opinion of it because how the production was run. Watching the interview with Katrina McCall that was on the second disc for the interviews, she explains that, well, when you're making like something like a gross and scary horror movie like this, you gotta have a lot of laughs in between takes, So maybe that's the reason to it, but this also kind of affected the way they were performing themselves into the movie. For example, there's this infamous shot of the film, which I couldn't understand why they didn't just do a retake of it, because there's a scene towards the end of the movie where David Warbeck and Katrina McCall, they're in the hospital getting chased by all these zombies, and they're trying to protect the girl named Jill, which, by the way, the actress who plays Jill is just a great child actress. She's just really on point with her performance. And in this shot, you can see David Warbeck, he's putting the bullet in the barrel of the gun, which, guns aren't cannons, and you can actually see in the footage Katrina slightly smiling, about to laugh, saying David Warbeck doing this and all that. It reminded me of Samurai Cop, but the main actor who plays Joe, the samurai cop, on the second time around when they were filming, after the first round, after he cut his hair, after he was forced to wear a wig for most of the film, he was really upset, working again and all that. So he intentionally sabotaged his scenes by, when he's doing the fist, he's doing this. So it's obvious that he's going to break his thumbs and all that. But putting the bullet in the barrel reminded me of that, which doesn't sound so great. So besides the commentary track, I did watch 3 of the interviews, which is with Katrina McCall, which was pretty interesting to listen to. A point that I find it fascinating, she was talking about actors and how Lucio Fulci treated them and all that. He didn't speak any much English and all, so he was mostly kind of miming what he wanted the actors to do for the movie, which kind of reminds me of Sergio Leone, because in The Fistful of Dollars, according to Clint Eastwood, Leone will have a cowboy hat and a fake plastic gun with them, and he will told Clint Eastwood, "Watch me," and he will reenact the entire scene before filming, so Clint Eastwood had the idea what to do. And the 2 other interviews, it's one from Larry Ray, the U.S. production manager, which is very eye-opening to see how film production very much worked out and all that. He talks about how he had to help the production out, Lucio Fulci's we're filming a jazz scene, so we need a jazz bar. So he talks about how that took a lot of work and effort just to film this one scene that took only 1 day to film. We need band members. We need actors as waiters. We have to cover the pinball machines. We need to close off the street, so nobody will come in and just look in the windows and see a film crew and ruin the shot. It's kind of a bit of film school education and all that. It's oh, you want to see how production manager actually works and all. I should mention that what was it? You get this alternate cover of the film and all that. And in the interior, it has the entire filmography of Lucio Fulci. And of course a booklet, which I did not read yet, and the 2 discs where you have the movies and law interviews and archival interviews and panel videos as well. And the CD soundtrack, which I have not listened to. This is a slightly edited version of the poster artwork that they will use for the US release of the film. With the US version, it's not included on the Blu-ray release. In fact, the opening and closing credits, it's only included as a bonus feature, hidden away, a bonus Easter egg that you have to find by playing around with the Blu-ray menu. I know where it is, but just to make things fun, I'll not tell you where it is. But it comes from a video transfer, I will mention. In fact, the other trailers, for 7 Doors of Death, the US TV spot, and the US trailer, they're all from video transfers. For the US release of 7 Doors of Death, Terry Lubin, he was in contact with Tobe Hooper and got him to watch 7 Doors of Death. So in the poster, it literally has critics' quotes, but from horror filmmakers, of course.
Filled with unrelenting excitement, a truly original haunted house thriller.
And they have that same quote here on the Blu-ray set. Unfortunately, when they did the 4K Blu-ray release, they included the movie on a DVD. Supposedly, according to Wikipedia, which I'm not sure where I could find a source of this, there weren't any film elements that exists for Seven Doors of Death, only like video transfers, which is very unfortunate, and I think it's a lost opportunity. They couldn't just, or do a 4K reconstruction of like the Seven Doors of Death version of it, even though it's not probably a great version of the movie because it cuts out all the memorable gore parts. It would be very interesting to have, as a historical preservation standpoint, this is how, one of the best, Italian horror movies that were first exposed here in the US. The movie did got re-released in the 90s through Rolling Thunder Pictures and Grindhouse Releasing. Rolling Thunder Pictures was Tarantino's distribution company that was owned by Miramax, where he was re-releasing some of his favorite movies that he was able to obtain rights to, such as Mighty Picket Man and Switchblade Sisters. And that has an interesting story on its own, where apparently Bob Murawski was in contact with Lucio Fulci to re-release it. Fulci was really happy about this, that people were paying attention to his older films, and he even traveled to Italy to meet with him, until they found out when landing in Italy that Lucio Fulci passed away, which is unfortunate to see Fulci pass away before he could see his films being revitalized and all that. It was happening later in his life and all that when he started being invited to some horror conventions, but probably will hit it really full swing when The Beyond was being re-released in theaters, and of course got the Grindhouse DVD release, the Blu-ray release of course, and of course the recent 4K release of the film. I think it's time to mention basically bootleg version of The Beyond. Now, I got this thinking it was the US cut of the film. I was like, oh, this is probably the only time you could actually get the US cut, besides the rare and expensive big box VHS release or getting the 4K set. And I realized this is actually a version of the movie that's 4 minutes shorter of the uncut original Italian version with the English dub, of course. What? It has the Italian credits, but they freeze frame the title card for the opening credits, so they got rid of The Beyond and just said Seven Doors of Death, like this video generated subtitles, and it's in widescreen. So this is a very weird DVD release. If you're wondering, the US cut is 2 minutes shorter than this. This is 80 minutes. The US cut is 78 minutes, and of course the Italian version is 89 minutes. So this is just a weird release. This is put out by Diamond Entertainment, which started out as Trans Films or Trans Entertainment. They put out Yog Monster from Outer Space on VHS, and a lot of these supposed public domain films or making these legally dubious VHS releases. Diamond Entertainment will later close down its doors in probably in the mid 2000s, and I think there's a weird thing where their address leads to a medicine office. I'm tempted to keep this, but I'm also tempted to sell it because I kind of wasted my money. I thought this is the American cut, but no. It's just a shorter version of the Italian version, but a 2 minute longer version compared to the US cut. Such a strange release. So overall, it's a pretty good horror movie. I highly recommend to watch it. If you don't want to spend the big bucks on the 4K Blu-ray release, just go with the Blu-ray release here from Grindhouse Releasing. It's a pretty great HD transfer of the movie and all that. The 4K Blu-ray, according to Bob Murawski, which I'll leave the interview that I'm going to cite about this for the information here, apparently took a decade in the making of, which is kind of insane to hear, where apparently Technicolor Rome wasn't treating the movie very well. In fact, there's a famous story where he talks about in the Vinegar Syndrome movie Against the Grain, a documentary about film preservation of exploitation cinema, which is featured on their Lost Picture Show Blu-ray set. He talks about how Technicolor Rome just had a very low opinion on these exploitation films. So he talks about how he was looking through the negative of The Beyond, and it was very damaged and not very preserved well because Technicolor Rome had a low opinion of it. And there was a particular splice mark, and he told one of the employees of Technicolor Rome, there's a splice mark, could you fix it and all that? So he just grabbed regular Scotch tape, smeared it on the film, pushed the bubbles down with his thumb, and he's like, bueno, 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 and walked away. In the interview that he recently did this year, when he was promoting Scholar Warning 6666, he's talking about how Technicolor Rome cannot deliver a decent 4K scan of the movie, which is kind of insane to hear. It's how can you not deliver a good 4K scan of any movie? So he made them transport the film reels to another film lab to actually give a good 4K scan of it. But because apparently Technicolor Rome handled the negative so much that there were now new scratches on the negative that they had to digitally fix. So a 4K version of The Beyond was essentially a miracle. So yeah, if you have the extra dough, go get the 4K Blu-ray. If you want to like save up a little bit of money, just get, you know, the standard Blu-ray release of it, because it has a really great slew of bonus features and you wouldn't regret it. Unlike me when I regret getting this DVD. So yeah, that's all the review. Have a nice day and later on come back to our video store.